Hey guys, today's tutorial is going to be a longer one about creating a full moody sci-fi scene in Blender. Let's go. So we're in Blender, make a new file. Let's start with the ground. We'll add in a plane, scale it on the Y, and then scale it all together. Scale it on the X a bit. Cool, now we have our ground. Now let's texture the ground to start to get the mood of our scene going. So we've got our principled BSDF, and if you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, which you definitely should, you can press Ctrl-Shift-T on the principled BSDF. Blender will take you to your file path, and then you want to take Blender to this asphalt texture, which I'll link below in the description. We'll grab the displacement, the normal, the roughness, the ambient occlusion, and the color, principled texture setup, and then it will just put it all in for us. Let's go into material preview. And as you can see, the UVs are stretched and a bit weird here. So let's fix that quickly. We can press Ctrl A, apply all transforms, go into edit mode, make sure everything is selected with A, press U, cube projection. Now that looks a lot better, but we want to scale it up. So we can just press A in the UV editor here, scale it up. Something like that looks good. Now for some reason the normal hasn't come in here. We can also mix in our ambient occlusion. So what you want to do is you want to add in a mix node, change that to color, and then put the ambient occlusion into color B and the normal color into A. Change that to multiply, and then plug the result into the base color. Cool, so now we have our asphalt texture, but I want to make it shiny. I want to make it look wet, like some dark back alleyway. So to do that, we'll disconnect the roughness map here. If you have Node Wrangler add-on enabled, you can go Control right click, then you can cut through these noodles and disconnect them. Once you've disconnected the roughness, you can drag the roughness value down to 0. But you can see here, it's not completely shiny, and that's because the normal map is adding some bump, and that bump creates roughness. But we want to control where this bump is, so we have parts that are shiny and parts that are completely bumpy. So to control that, we can add in another image texture here. Just search that up. Now what we want to do is we want to get just any grungy photo. I'm using a roughness map from another ambient CG texture. I'll link that down below. And then we want to plug that into the strength of the normal map. And now you can see that's already taking effect, where some parts are completely bumpy and some parts are completely shiny. But to control this, we can add in a color ramp. Control-Shift-Click on the color ramp to view it by itself. Now we can just drag these black values up. Not too far because we don't want to lose all the detail, but something like that'll work well, and then drag the white up. And now we Control-Shift-Click back on the principled BSDF. And there we go, we've got a sort of shiny looking asphalt. If you want to change the scale of your ground, but you don't want to redo your UVs, quick tip here, if you go into edit mode, then you go options, and you go correct face attributes. Now if I go SX, it will just unwrap it as I scale it in, instead of stretching the UVs. Next, let's add the subject of our scene, which also acts as our light. So we want to add in a plane, rotate that 90 degrees on the X axis, drag it up, and now we want to scale it on the Z axis. Now what we want to do is we want to apply all transforms, go into edit mode, make sure you're in face select, inset the face to something around about here, and then we want to delete this face, going X, delete faces. Now we're left with the border of this plane. We want to make a new material, let's call it emissive. We're going to turn the emission up. You can pick whatever color you want. I'm going to go for a blue. Now we want to add some variation, so it's not just clearly an emission texture. So what we want to do is we want to add in an image texture, and now I will leave a link to this photo in the description, but it's just a concrete image from Unsplash. It's free in CC0. Now what we can do is we can plug that color into the alpha and into the emission strength. So now let's control this. So basically what the alpha is going to do is where it is black, it will be completely see-through, and where it's white is when you'll be able to see it. So you can see here where it's black, and if I bring that up, now we won't be able to see that in the principled BSDF. It will be see-through, but first let's unwrap this properly. So go into edit mode, press A to select everything, U, cube projection, it's the best way to unwrap. Now we can get this and maybe scale it up by 2, maybe another 2 again. That looks pretty good. Alpha doesn't really work in material preview. It will only work in rendered mode in cycles. So yeah, something to keep in mind. Okay, now we want to add some more emission strength. So it's actually bright and it can light our scene. So to do that, we just want to add in a math node to the here. And then we want to change that to multiply and maybe multiply it by 140. Now let's see what this would look like in rendered mode. So first, make sure you have nothing connected to your world output. For example, I have a sky texture in here. I'll just delete that and change it. And see, wow, it already looks pretty cool. Creates these cool reflections in the asphalt. One thing I do want to do is I want to add in some volume. So we'll add in a volume scatter node in the world. Drag the volume into the volume. Now, of course, that is extremely dense, so we'll make it 0.008. And maybe drag the anisotropy up, which just basically makes the volume more powerful near the light. So we can put that at like 0.7. Now we have the subject of our image. We can of course change that later, but it's good for now. Now let's make these buildings here in Blender. They're quite simple to make. We'll just add in a cube, GZ1 to move that onto our ground plane, then G-Shift-Z to move that across to the side here. Then we want to go into edit mode, scale it, Shift-Z, so it won't scale it on the Z axis. Something like that. We can now drag this face up a little bit. Maybe a bit more. Something like that will work well. Now we want to press E to extrude it. And now this is how tall our building's going to be. Something like that should work. We can always make it taller later. Now we want to grab this face and subdivide it. And then we want to go to our menu and subdivide it maybe 6 times. 7 should work. And now we want to go in and we want to add in a loop cut here. So once there. And this is just so our windows are square. That's all we're really doing here. Now we can select all of these by just dragging and selecting all of that. There we go, now we've got this face, and now we want to inset our window. So we're going to press I, and then press I again to inset the faces individually, and then we'll drag it back to about there. Then we want to press Alt-E, extrude faces along normals, and while holding Shift, we'll just pull that back in. Something like that should work. So now we have our windows. We want to assign a glass material to them. So we'll just go New, and we'll call this Glass, and then we'll go Assign. And then we'll press Control I to select the invert of that selection, so basically everything else. And we'll go plus, new material, and we'll call that brick. Now we want to assign that to the brick material. And now let's texture them. So the glass is quite simple. We can just drag this transmission up. We'll go material preview just to see what we're doing. And the roughness down. And now you've got basic glass, but I want to add some variation and detail to the roughness. So we'll add in our image texture. Drag the color into the roughness. Now we'll open this up, go to your textures, and I'll leave a link to this textures.com scratched grunge looking thing. Now that's plugged into our roughness, already looking pretty cool. Let's add in a color ramp though to enunciate it and add some contrast. So I'll bring those blacks up, not too far because otherwise we lose too much detail, and bring the whites up. Now we want to UV unwrap this, so we'll just press A, U, cube projection, and maybe select all of this and scale this up by 4. And like that will look cool. So we'll do our brick now. So you select brick over here, and for our brick we'll do another PBR texture, adding our own little variations. So Control-Shift-T on the BSDF, go to your textures, and I'll link this texture down below as well. It's just a textures.com brick. So we'll grab the albedo, the height, the AO, the roughness, and the normal. Principal texture set up, and we'll set that all up. And I want to show you guys a cool trick with the displacement here. So we'll just disconnect that there, drag that over here, give us some space. Now what we want to do is we want to add in a bump map. And now the normal map will go into the normal of the bump map, and then we'll plug the displacement color into the height of the bump. And there we go. And now of course we want to turn down the strength of that because it is quite intense. So something like 0.3 should be okay. Now we want to mix in our ambient occlusion, so we'll just add in a mix node, change that to color. Ambient occlusion in B, change the mix to multiply, and then just drag that factor up to 1. Cool. We also want to make the brick wet, because if the ground was wet from rain, then the building would be as well. So you can just add in a color ramp, Control-Shift-Click to view that by itself. And now just bring up those blacks to something like that, and other white as well. Control Shift click back on the BSDF. I actually want to change the black here so it's not completely reflective where it's black. So maybe make that like a lighter grey. Yeah, that's a bit better. We want to make this our environment so it surrounds the plane. So an easy way to do that is we can press Control A, apply all transforms. Then we want to add in a array modifier, not on the x-axis, on the y-axis by 1. And maybe do that 4 times. Pull this back on the x-axis just a little bit. Make sure you apply location so that the origin is at the 3D cursor. Now we can add in a mirror modifier and it will just mirror it over the 3D cursor. So we've got our brick buildings on both sides. And for a building at the end of the alleyway here, we want to duplicate this and then just press X on both these modifiers, so we're just left with one building. Now with our one building, we can set origin to the geometry. So when we rotate this 90 degrees on the Z-axis, it rotates it the wrong way. Quick tip here, if you press the minus key, it will do it the opposite to that. And now you can just drag it back here, and that should work. One thing I want to change here is the fact that the brick looks a bit too small for the scale. So what we can do is we can go into edit mode, make sure everything's deselected, go brick and go select, and it will select all the faces that have the brick material. And now in the UV editor, we can scale that up by 2. And yeah, that looks better. Now we want to set up our camera, because as you can tell, it's not looking very good right now. So let's fix that. I'm just going to pull that up, rotate it on the x-axis a little bit, just so it's looking up. Now I want to change this from perspective to panoramic. This is how we get our fisheye look. Change that to fisheye lens polynomial. So this is how I've set up my camera here. It's pretty close to the ground and it's just looking straight up. These are the settings here I've used for the fisheye lens polynomial. I found that these are good numbers to get that fisheye look without getting the dark corners in the edges of your image. So yeah, just pause the video here and copy these settings. I think the subject of our image is a bit too tall, so I'm going to set origin to geometry, scale it on the Z-axis down a little bit, and then pull it up, scale it on the X-axis in. Basically, it's just playing around till you find a spot where you like it. I think it's a bit too blue. I like it a bit darker. I eventually settled with this color here. Here's the hex value if you want to copy that. I think we can pull the camera back. I'm just playing around here. This is really up to you now, what you want to do with the scene and what you want to add to it. I'm going to select all the window faces here with the same selection method I've used before. Grab that on the x-axis and just bring it in. I think it was a bit too inset before. So yeah, that looks a bit better. Now I think I want to add some bit of displacement to the ground here using the same method we did before, where we get our normal map, then we add in our bump, and then we get the height of our displacement and plug that into the height of the bump map. Now let's turn the strength of our bump map down. This bump map isn't working how I would like it to. Maybe what we can do is we can get the value that we were using to control the strength of our normal map and use that to control the strength of the bump map as well. So we'll use the same values here from our grungy image and we'll plug that into the strength of the bump map. So where it's shiny, there's not going to be any of this bump. We can take that distance down to maybe 0.3, and I still think the bump is too much, so we can add in a map range node here. Basically what it does is it takes your values from 0 to 1 and then converts them to whatever you want this to be. So maybe the max amount of bump there should be is only 0.5. So it takes our values of 0 to 1 and makes it only 0 to 0.5. Now we can increase the strength of this, play with the value of how bright it is, like 250 maybe. Yeah, that's good. Let's add in another light here just so we can get some more diffused light on the rest of our scene. So we'll go light, spot, GZ, drag that up. Use the same color as our emissive texture for our light. So we'll go Control C, go to our light, Control V, and then we want to change the power to maybe 50,000 just to see what that's like. Now it's a bit too much, that overshadows our emission. So I settle with 3000 here. We can change this blend to 1, maybe narrow in the spot size. I think I want to pull the camera back even more. So GY, and then maybe even duplicate these buildings back, Shift DY, just so we have buildings on all sides. Now because we've pulled our camera back so far, our light can be seen, so we'll just drag that up. And because we've dragged it up more, maybe we can change this power to 7,000 now. Okay, the building in the background here is a bit distracting because it's smaller than this. So I think what we need to do is we need to select all our buildings here. With our correct face attributes enabled, we can just go SZ just a little bit, and then maybe go side view and make sure we're aligned with our ground. I like the height of all the buildings except for the one at the back here. So if we hover over this one and press L, it will select linked. And now we can just scale that on the Z axis, bring it up. And now to add some detail and scale into our scene, we want to add a person. And you'll know why people add scale if you check out my last video. Anyway, to add a person, we'll make sure we have the SCI-FI add-on enabled. I've got a YouTube short on how to do that. Make sure you check that one out as well. We'll activate add-on. I've already logged in, and we'll just look up person. Now we can look at our options here, and this person here will be good, and we can go import model and then just wait for that to import. That will take a second. And then we'll be adding some electrical boxes, also from Sketchfab, free and CC0, to add some detail and make it look a bit more realistic. I will shift select one part of this guy and press Ctrl J to join them together. Now we've got a very cool looking guy here. He's not very centered though, so we'll rotate him back on the X axis so he's like flat with the ground. His texturing is extremely weird, so we'll just delete all of this and add in a principled BSDF. Connect the BSDF to the surface and then just plug the color into the base color. Now we can bring him towards the camera, moving him on the Y axis. Rotate 180 degrees so he's looking at the thing. Now of course you can tell here the fisheye's distortion is doing some weird things to his body, and we're gonna just fix that by just scaling him so he's thinner in our viewport, but in the render he looks a bit more natural. So I mean, this is the only way I found to work around the fisheye distortion, and it's fine, no one's really gonna know. So we'll just keep scaling them on the X and looking over to our rendered view. And now what we can do is we can drag them on the Y axis back closer to our subject. Make sure he's about the middle of the scene. Now this is really up to you where you want to put him and if you want to put him on anything. I'm just going to keep basic here, scale him up. Make sure the scale kind of works, because it'll be kind of weird if the brick wall is huge compared to our guy here. So that's what I'm just trying to figure out here, what looks real enough. One thing I do want to change is these brick walls are a little bit too reflective. So what we can do, instead of changing the color of our gray, we can add in our map range node here, which I explained earlier. So we can just change the minimum to like 0.2. So it can't be, yeah, too reflective. I like 0.5. Okay, final step is we want to add some electrical boxes just to make it look more like a real place. So we can just literally look up electrical box in our Sketchfab add-on, wait for it to load on the search results. This one here works, we'll just import model. So it's imported here, we just want to drag it up, something like that, rotate that 90 degrees, and pull that over onto our wall. Go into camera view, and position it somewhere interesting enough. Something like that will work. Of course you can spend more time detailing this scene, adding in cables, whatever you want, supports, whatever. I'm just keeping it really simple here, just so anyone can follow along and do it really quickly and make something cool. We'll import this model here as well, because we don't want to use the same model the whole time, otherwise it'll be very obvious. We'll drag that up, rotate that 90 degrees, minus. Cool. Pull that over onto this side. That looks good. Let's add a couple more. Maybe we can pick these boxes here. Import model. And while we're waiting, make sure to scroll down and click like and subscribe to see more videos like this. Okay, so it's imported quite a few models here. We'll press Alt-P, clear, and keep transformation so everything's individual. Okay, with all of our stuff selected here, we can rotate that 180 degrees to flip it over, drag it back, chuck it on the side of the wall, scale it up, pull it up. Now, because this is of course too much detail in one spot, we can just select something like this and maybe pull it over to the other side. GX. It's just placing assets, you know, figuring out where it looks good, where it's good to add some more detail. So we can just scale that up. Now over here, maybe we can delete these things and just keep these things. We can drag this one up, scale that up. Cool. And now we can even pull this one back, scale it up. Nice, that's looking really cool. Let's render it. So go into render settings. For render, noise threshold 0.01. We'll change these max samples. I'm running at 512 samples here. You can do less or more depending on what you think. Not using any denoise. Make sure your mist and denoising data passes are enabled because we're going to do a little bit of compositing here. And just to make sure our mist pass is actually going to work, we can go into our rendered view, go render pass, combined, change that to mist. And now that's already looking pretty good. I don't think we have to change any of the mist pass settings. For our quick compositing here, we're going to go use nodes, drag this render layers, add in our lens distortion. This is just going to add some chromatic aberration because it's easier to add it here than in Photoshop or Photopea, which is what we're going to use for this tutorial. And then we'll add in our denoise node, add at the end here, add in our denoising normal and our albedo. So I've already rendered and I didn't like how it looked. So I brought this back building closer because it adds some more detail and reflection. I also increased the contrast a little bit here, add some more black. And with the ground material, I brought the black up and added some more contrast to this the grunge map. So yeah, before you render, just do those couple of things and then you're good to render. So my render's finished here. Looks pretty damn cool. We'll save it on our computer really quickly. So now that's saved, let's get our mist pass done. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into compositing. We're going to get our mist, put that into the image, and then change our denoising albedo to denoising depth. We can change our samples down to 64 for our mist pass. We don't need too many. And then we can go to render, render image. When it's rendering, it might look like it's rendering the combined passes and it doesn't look like it's rendering the mist pass, but don't worry about that. Once it's finished rendering the whole thing, it will just switch to mist pass. So our mist pass is done. Let's go image, save, and we'll save that where we've saved our original picture. Now, where all our magic is going to come in is with our post-production. And I know some of you won't have Photoshop because it is very expensive. So instead, we're going to use Photopea, which is basically Photoshop but online. So if you look that up, is the website here. And we can go open from computer and we can direct Photopea to our render that we just saved. We'll go open, wait for that to load in. Cool, now it's in here. So what we want to do is we want to press Ctrl J, which duplicates our layer. Same shortcuts as Photoshop. Then we want to change this blending mode to screen. This is just going to add a bit of glow and whatever. We can change the fill so it's not too bright. We can do something like 50%. Cool, that looks good. Now let's add in our mist pass. So we'll open that up in our folder here. So with our mist pass imported, we can go into channels and then just control click on one of the channels and it will make a selection based on the brightest parts of the image. Now we want to go back to our layers, turn this image off, go new layer, and then add in a layer mask based off that selection. Now we want to get our bucket tool over here. To pick a color we want to fill our layer with, you want to go ahead and select the background layer. Make sure you have the eyedropper tool enabled. And while you've got that enabled, hold Alt and then just drag your mouse until you think there's a color that would be good to fill the layer with. So something like that. We'll go on our layer. We'll fill our layer with that color. Make sure it's the top one here. So now we've got this. First we want to apply the layer mask. Then we want to add in a new layer mask, Control I to invert it so it's black. And now with our mouse, or if you have a tablet, I just have a really cheap Wacom tablet that you can use. And with this, we can draw in where we want this fog. So to brush in our fog effect, we'll change our tool to brush by pressing B. Then we will make this a white, make our brush bigger by using square bracket keys. We can also change our brush to this one here, which is a bit softer. We don't want it too harsh. And now what we can do is we can brush this in, maybe change the opacity to be a bit lower so it's not so harsh of an effect. So yeah, there we go, I like that. And now yeah, you can just put this in where you think it's appropriate. So now we're going to add in some lens dirt. So there's actually a free lens dirt pack from Action VFX. I'll leave the link to it in the description. I'm going to use this one here, Lens Dirt 5. And now what we're going to do is we're going to right click, rotate 90 degrees this way, and then just scale it up over the subject of our image. And now we want to click out and change the blending mode to screen. And now once we've got our blending mode to screen, we will add in a layer mask, invert it, and then with our white brush we can just brush in the lens dirt. So yeah, same principles as before. And if you ever do want to change your layer mask by adding in some black, you can just switch the color, change that to black, and now we can erase some of the lens dirt that I've added. Okay, now I want to change the fill of this layer, just pull it down so the effect isn't as intense. Cool, I think that looks good. Let's add in our color grading. We're going to select our top layer here, we're going to press Ctrl Alt Shift E, and what that's going to do is it's going to duplicate all our layers below the top layer and then merge them together. So we've got this one master layer here. Now what we can do to this master layer is convert to smart object, so it saves any of the filters that we add to it, and then we can go to filter and go camera raw. And this is where we do our color editing. So we can grab our temperature here, which either makes it orange, warm, or cold, blue. So we can drag that negative something, looks good enough. This pulls it green or pink. So maybe pull it green a little bit, changes the hue of the blue. Play with the exposure here, make it a bit more bright. Now I'm going to play with the contrast. Yeah, that does a lot. And then the vibrance is how, well, vibrant the colors are. So we'll pull that up. And then the saturation is of course really important. Now we'll press OK to save that. And this is definitely where your major changes are going to happen. We're going to add in some noise as well. I know we spend a lot of time trying to get rid of noise in Cycles, but that's because the grain from Cycles doesn't look as nice as actual film grain. So we can change with the amount here. Let's change this to 10%. Nice. We could also add some sharpening here. So if we go filter, sharpen, and then just go sharpen. Okay, we've added in our sharpening, but it's doing a bit too much. So I've just clicked on the settings button here, and then we can just bring that opacity down. That looks good like that. We can add in a LUT. So if you click this half circle here, and then we can go to color lookup. And now we want to press reset, and then we want to choose the LUTs from here. So the LUT I've chosen here is Ava 614. So if I turn that on and off, you can see what it's doing. Just adding some more contrast and darkness around the edges. Speaking of darkness around the edges, let's add in a bit of a homemade vignette. So we'll add in a levels layer, then we'll pull the white down. So it's darker. Yeah, around 130 works well. And now it's already got a layer mask in here. So we'll invert that. And then with our brush that's white, we'll brush that in on the edges. So wherever you think it needs to be darkened so that the viewer's eye is focused on the subject of the image, just brush it in. Now, of course, if the effect is too dramatic, you can change the levels so it has less of an effect. That's probably better. Now, final step, we're just going to add in a curves. We're just going to grab the point in the middle here. We're just going to bring that up. So there's our final image. Now, of course, you could forever keep on editing this, but I think it looks quite good as it is. Now, to export it, you just have to go to File, Export As, and then just choose whichever file type that you want. Thanks for watching till the end. Hope you made something you're proud of and you liked it. Make sure to check out some of my other videos, like and subscribe, and keep going with Blender. You got this.